Well, one of the perks of being part of a network, in this case, a Locked On Podcast Network, is whenever the Warriors do something like sign a player like Usman Garuba, I get to reach out to the Locked On Rockets host, in this case being Jackson Gatlin, who's going to join me to talk about the new member of the Golden State Warriors. Plus, I'm going to give an update on Dwight Howard. No news, but there is an update. We'll talk all that and so much more next. This is Locked On Warriors.
You are Locked On Warriors, your daily Golden State Warriors podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Warriors your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Jase Medical. Empower yourself when you purchase a Jase case, providing you with a personal supply of 5 antibiotics that treat 50 plus infections. Get yours today at jasemedical.com. That's Jase, Jase medical.com. You can follow the host of Locked On Rockets, Jackson Gatlin, at JT Gatlin. You can follow me, Cyrus Saatsaz, on Threads at Dog Wild. Are you on Threads? Is this a Twitter account that you're promoting for you, Jackson? Where are you these days?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't been using Threads lately. Unfortunately, I gave it a shot when it first launched, like many others did, and I'm waiting to see if maybe Meta tries to breathe some new life into the platform. But for now, you can track down all of my blabbering over at I guess X now, Twitter. X. There you go. Yeah.
The Threads is blowing up. It's changed night and day from probably when you first checked into now. There's actually a lot of people there. I'm getting NBA news there. Waj drops bombs there. So no, Threads is blowing up, man. If you decide to reactivate on Threads, is this also at JT Gatlin?
Yeah, same handle, thankfully.
There you go. So and again, you can follow me there at Dog Wild. This program is still on X at Locked on Dubs. You can follow us there. But I brought you in, Jackson, because the Golden State Warriors, at least Shams Charania dropped some bombs late last week when it comes to news and the Golden State Warriors. And it was about a pair of players. He first mentioned that Dwight Howard was coming in for a workout, and I'm going to talk about him in a little bit because he's a former Rocket. You're familiar with him. But the Warriors signed a player that was on the Rockets for 2 years, a former first-round pick for the Houston Rockets, and that's Usman Garuba. The Warriors, I feel like, luckily signed him to a two-way deal because that gives them flexibility in terms of their roster. If they really like him, they can offer him a guaranteed deal at some point down the road. If it doesn't pan out, they could just waive him at any point, or they could just banish him to Santa Cruz. But Jackson, tell us about Usman, man. Who is he as a player? What are your thoughts on Usman Garuba?
First off, my first reaction when the Rockets ultimately went into the series of moves that they orchestrated this offseason to attempt to free up some cap space to pursue Brook Lopez, which ultimately didn't wind up mattering because Brook Lopez just wanted to leverage the Rockets to get Milwaukee to pay him a little bit more money on his new deal over there. I was really sad to see Usman Garuba go. In fact, I think of the handful of Rockets players that the organization decided to cut ties with this past offseason: KJ Martin, Garuba, Ty Washington, and Josh Christopher. I was saddest to see Usman Garuba go because I've been an advocate of his for a long time. I really think that he has the potential to be a fantastic, defensive Swiss Army knife of an NBA player and can very easily be an integral part of a team that's looking to make a championship push somewhere further down the line. He was a key component of the Spanish national team and has been for years now. And I know we're going to get into this a little bit later, but he has a game that is very Draymond Green light in a way. When you watch the way that he plays and how he's able to impact the defensive side of the floor, guarding all 5 positions, and then even offensively, the thing that I think is most slept on about him is his playmaking ability. He is great with the ball in his hands in the short roll, making the right reads, finding open guys. I don't know if you're going to get necessarily the highlight level passing that you do out of a Draymond Green from Usman Garuba, at least not right out of the gate, but putting him on the same team as Draymond Green for him to be able to learn from him and kind of model his game after a guy who's been doing this for so many years at a very, very high level. That's going to be so beneficial for him.
Oh, so far everything you're saying is music to my ears. What was he like as did he play college ball? Was he an international player? Like, how did the Rockets discover him?
International prospect, came from overseas, played for the Spanish national team. And at the time that he was drafted, probably a bit of hyperbole here, but Rafael Stone, the Rockets general manager, said that he was, quote, the greatest defender in the world, not in the NBA, end quote. So probably a bit of hyperbole there, but I do very much agree that Usman Garuba has that level of defensive flexibility that the NBA is kind of trending towards today. He's 6'8", he moves well on his feet. He can guard 1 through 5. You can comfortably switch him out onto the perimeter on smaller players. He can handle bigger guys. At the NBA level, he's probably more so suited to be a small ball 5 than a true full-time 4, because the one major knock on his game, a couple major knocks on his game, is his offense is rather limited. I know I just highlighted his passing ability there a moment ago, which is still really impressive for a player his age, but his 3 ball is rather inconsistent. If you just pull up his basketball reference page and you look at this past season, you're thinking, oh man, he shot a little over 40% from 3. That's incredible. It was on very, very low volume. And he had one point during the season where he drained like 16 threes in a row. And then he went and missed like his next 20 or something. So it was, night and day different. Like for one point, it looked like he turned into just a 3-point sniper for a little while. And then he just forgot how to shoot the 3 ball. So he is wildly inconsistent from beyond the arc, unfortunately, at this point. And he's got like stone hands when it comes to catching passes around the rim. He drops a lot of gimmies that should lead to easy layups in and around the cup. And he's not an above the rim player either. So he's not somebody that gives you, necessarily the vertical spacing around the basket. And that can be a bit problematic at times when you're running him as your 5 on the floor. So there's a lot of good and some not so good with Usman Garuba, but for a young prospect that you're able to get on a 2-way deal, like you alluded to earlier, right? Very little, almost no commitment from the Warriors organization. I think they have a chance to actually strike gold here with Usman Garuba, and it's going to make me sick to my stomach if the Rockets wound up letting Usman Garuba go and then he finds NBA success with the Golden State Warriors. That'll just be adding salt to an already slightly frustrating wound.
I can imagine. So is literally the only reason why the Rockets traded him was to create salary cap space for Brook Lopez? Like, is that the primary reason they gave up on him?
Yeah, pretty much. It's unfortunate because they didn't really get a great look at him his first season in the NBA. He struggled with some injuries and he was kind of buried in the depth chart behind Christian Wood, Alperen Sengun. There just wasn't enough runtime for him that first year. And then he actually had an issue where he was supposed to attend Summer League last summer and play along with Jabari Smith Jr., Tari Eason right after they got drafted. And then he had another ankle injury. He's not injury prone. It's just like a weird assortment of injuries that have happened. Not anything that's like, glaring or a consistent injury in the same part of his body that you have to be worried about long-term. And then this past season, they did get a good look at him. They were running kind of this weird 3-man center lineup where Alperen Sengun was your starter. And then they toggled between Bruno Fernando and Usman Garuba as the 2 primary backups throughout the season. And Garuba, I think, situationally did the most that he could with his minutes. But frankly, the Rockets were just kind of a dumpster fire top to bottom. And you look up and down that roster and a lot of guys really struggled. And it's unfortunate because I look at Garuba's skill set as a player and I really thought that he could have had a chance to shine in an Ime Udoka system. He screams like he's the type of player that Ime Udoka would have loved to have in his system. But ultimately, with where the Rockets are at and their vision for what they're trying to achieve moving forward, at least at their 5 spot, they're kind of locked up with Alperen Sengun, and they brought in Jock Landale. At the 4 spot, they've got Jabari Smith Jr., Tari Eason. It's just kind of one of those situations where there was a bit of a roster squeeze, and it also played into, again, trying to create that cap room to make another significant marquee acquisition this past offseason that didn't pan out, but they probably would have still cut ties with him going into this next season anyway, because I think organizationally they got a chance to see what he could maybe do and didn't really have a spot for him moving forward, given some of the other players that they had on the roster.
Yeah, I personally love Jacques Lindell. I thought he was doing some fantastic things for the Suns last year. He was always burning the Warriors, although I feel like any big was doing that. But so I'm gonna have a few more questions for you pertaining to Usman, and then I'm gonna touch on Dwight Howard because there is an update there. He did work out with the Golden State Warriors this week. I first got to give some love though to Jase Case, and more specifically Jase Medical, one of the newer sponsors for the Locked On Podcast Network. And look, the way I've been selling this is it's not complicated, folks. It's good to have a medical kit in your house. Emergencies happen, whether it's a natural disaster, whether it's just, you're cutting something up in the kitchen and next thing you know, you slice your hand. Whatever the situation may be, a medical kit is valuable to have in your house. But what makes a Jase case different than your traditional medical kit that normally is stocked with, your standard supplies like Band-Aids and maybe a Neosporin, some gauze? The Jase case provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use. You can't just buy antibiotics at a store. Those are prescribed. And all it takes to get a Jase case is fill out a simple online form. And in some cases, you jump on a quick call with one of our board certified physicians, and you're going to get ongoing care from their physicians on any treatment related questions. Jase is doctor created and doctor recommended. When you're doing your reads, is there anything that I didn't say that you add for Jase, Jackson, for the Locked On Rockets audience?
I think you hit all the key points, man. I think Jase case is something that everybody should have in their home.
Agreed. Absolutely. And it's not that difficult to get. You can save more than $360 by getting these life-saving antibiotics with Jase Medical, plus an additional $20 off by using the code Locked On at checkout on jasemedical.com. That's Jase, Jase medical.com. One more time, save more than $360. Plus, you save an additional $20 if you use the code Locked On at checkout. Again, that's jasemedical.com, Jase, Jase medical.com, and use the promo code Locked On.
You are Locked On Warriors, your daily Golden State Warriors podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Warriors your first listen every day. Every day, yours, Kylan Mills is going to be back on the show with me soon. And I'm going to start pumping this up. Hall of Famer Rick Barry is going to be a regular guest on this program once the season starts. He's going to be on either every week, or if he's really busy, every other week. But I'm really excited to start hyping that up. And of course, you can follow me on Threads at Dog Wild. You can follow the show on what's formerly known as Twitter. I guess it's X now, at Locked On Dubs. And that's
the artist formerly known as Twitter. There you go.
Exactly. And you can follow my guest, the host of Locked On Rockets, Jackson Gatlin, at JT Gatlin. He's available also on all social media platforms at that same handle. So just finishing up, one stat I saw about Usman Garuba, which stuck out to me as a huge positive, is his rebounding. In his second year in the league, playing for the Rockets, he averaged less than 13 minutes a game, more specifically 12.9. That's not a lot. Yet despite that, he averaged 4.1 rebounds per game, 1.6 of those offensive. That is a massive weak spot, I thought, for the Warriors last year. They were getting crushed on the glass. They were giving a lot of second chance opportunities to teams because of not getting their own offensive rebounds while letting other teams get those. Is Usman Garuba, in your opinion, a solid rebounder? Your thoughts?
Yeah, he does the dirty work really well. He's very, I think, fundamentally sound in certain aspects of his game. And I think a big part of that is, again, the defensive attributes that he brings to the table. And then also his rebounding. He does a good job of boxing out, throwing his body on somebody early on both the defensive side and the offensive side of the glass. He's also really good at back tapping, right? And I think that's an underrated skill for players, especially guys who are maybe a bit more undersized at their relative positions at the NBA level. So you have Garuba, a 6'8" guy, right? He's going up against other bigs that are maybe 6'10", 6'11", 7-footers. And it's really tough to just flat out rebound a guy that's that much bigger than you. But if you can just get in there, right? If you can get a quick jump in or a quick second jump, against some of those other, in the land of the trees, if you will, Those back taps are huge because if you can tap the ball out to the 3-point line and let a guard or one of the wings recover the ball, that's just as effective as actually coming down with the basketball yourself. Now, I will note there were a handful of times where he would come down with an offensive rebound and he would kind of put the blinders on and try to go back up with it. And again, that goes back into the fact that he really doesn't have any semblance of an offensive bag in and around the basket. And, I'd be watching him make those moves. I'm like, no, this is just get the ball out of your hands, man. You did your job. Now get it to somebody else who can do something with it offensively. So yeah, he can be a force on the glass. And again, I think that with the proper system around him, and I'm really excited to maybe see what he's able to do, in a system that's going to maybe capitalize on his passing ability a bit more, right? We saw this past season with the Houston Rockets. They have Alperen Şengün, this, really exciting, talented, up-and-coming big in the NBA, who is a passing phenom at an early age, 2 seasons in the NBA, and he's got a passing highlight reel that would rival some like 10-year-plus veterans. And the Rockets never really took advantage of that. They never really utilized him as like an offensive hub or a fulcrum to make life easier for Kevin Porter Jr. and Jalen Green offensively. And by that same token, they never really did the same thing with Usman Garuba, right? I think he's a guy that you can not full-blown run your offense through, but maybe let him have the ball at the top of the key, let him make some decisions in the offense. And I very much think that him shadowing and learning from Draymond Green, Usman Garuba might not be like the future Draymond Green for the Warriors organization, but he has so many of the same overlapping skills and abilities that I think even if he turns into, say, a poor man's Draymond Green, that's a much better way to, I guess, bridge the gap, as Draymond Green starts to wind down, as the end of the Warriors' Big Three era eventually comes to a head. You have that transition to make it a bit smoother going from Draymond to Garuba potentially further down the line, as long as he picks up the lessons and actually turns into a staple part of the Warriors rotation, which I think, Cyrus, if you were to ask me to check, say, like the FanDuel betting odds or something, if we could get like a special odds put together for this one, I'd say the odds are pretty solid that Garuba actually carves himself out a spot in the Warriors rotation this season.
Yeah, I hope so. And even though him and Lester Quinones are both on the roster right now as two-way players, as the Warriors showed last year, that doesn't mean anything until training camp's over and the season begins, because they made changes very last minute to their two-way roster spots. But I'd love your perspective before we talk about Dwight Howard. I'm going to do that in just a second. But look, you talked about Garuba being 6'8" and not quite, amongst the trees. But by the Golden State Warriors standards, 6'8" is gigantic. I mean, they're up their roster this coming season. Dario Saric is going to be their tallest player at 6'10". Kevon Looney, their starting center, is 6'9" if he starts. I mean, Chris Paul, there's reports out there from Mark Spears that Chris Paul might end up starting. If that's the case, you're talking about a true team of hobbits for the Golden State Warriors. But they don't have a lot of bigs like Trace Jackson Davis, who they drafted. He's a seasoned rookie, played 4 years. His dad played, so he's like 6'9", and that's the extent of it. And then Draymond Green. And so I guess what I'm asking you as an outsider's perspective, what are your thoughts on the Warriors and this obsession with small ball? Like, do you see the Warriors surviving and being real contenders with this kind of lineup? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it really depends on who you have occupying those small ball slots, right? I think that Draymond Green is very clearly a guy who plays a lot bigger than his listed height. And that's one of the best things about him as a player, right? Is even though he's listed at 6'5", and that might be a generous 6'5", if we're being honest, he plays so much bigger than that. He's got the insane wingspan. And I want to point out, as I mentioned, the wingspan, I think wingspan matters so much more than height at the NBA level. Fair. You can look at listed heights all day long, right? Doesn't really matter. Rob Williams for the Boston Celtics is listed at 6'8", might be 6'8", maybe closer to 6'7", but he can jump out of the gym and he's got an insane wingspan. I want to say it's 7'3". I'm going off memory here. The insane wingspan matters so much more because at the end of the day, you can still be a rim deterrent. You can still be a strong rebounding force. You can still be a guy who wreaks havoc on the defensive end and dealing with the land of the trees, even if you're not a massive lumbering 7-footer. Now, I will say the one downside to being, that small and not having a big, towering, brutish big to throw at other teams when you have a Joel Embiid who comes to town or a Jokic who comes to town. That's kind of the one issue, is because those guys are so talented and so massive in scale that if you don't have a big body to throw at them, you will get terrorized. And there's no two ways about it. You're going to be forced into some intricate defensive schemes where you're going to have to double or triple team to force the ball out of the hands, because if you try to guard those guys in single coverage with a Draymond Green or an Usman Garuba or a Kevon Looney, they might be able to handle them, a couple possessions out of 10, but Jokic is a guy who's going to have his way with smaller defenders more often than not. So that's the one downside to playing small as frequently as it seems like the Warriors are planning to do this upcoming season and historically have done. But I think that when you're a team like the Warriors that has the immense amount of talent that they have too, you can kind of get away with it. As long as you have the right defensive schemes, you have the right defensive principles in place to follow along with that, then you should be fine at the end of the day.
That's very fair. That's absolutely very fair. And Usman Garuba, if what I'm looking at is correct, has a wingspan measured at 7'2", which is solid. So that's another huge perk, and maybe that's a part of the reason why his rebounding numbers are so good. When we come back, we're going to talk about Dwight Howard, because there is some news pertaining to him and the Golden State Warriors. And we're going to wrap up the show with your perspective on Dwight, because he played for the Rockets. I also want to get your thoughts on your Rockets team as well, because they might actually be good this year for the first time in a little while. So we're going to have a little more here with Jackson Gatlin, host of Locked On Rockets. First, we're going to talk about another sponsor. Jackson, this is when the NBA season is around the corner, when you have multiple sponsors on your show. I'd almost forgotten that sometimes we break the show up twice. And the sponsor for the second break is FanDuel. And of course, with the NFL season back, FanDuel is more fun and exciting than ever. Is it legal in Texas, by the way?
It is not, unfortunately. I'm jealous of not being able to truly experience it. I'm able to. You can still see the platform, and it's fantastic, and it looks super easy to use. But betting not legal in Texas, unfortunately.
Same. It's not legal here in California. Now, one of my guests, Kevin Dana, the voice of the Santa Cruz Warriors, made a suggestion a few weeks back. Try some VPN action. See if it works. We're not endorsing that, but the VPN does hide your location. So maybe that'll work. I don't know. But regardless, snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. When you place a $5 bet, that's $200 in bonus bets, whether you win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide variety of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and much more. So visit FanDuel.com/locked-on and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL.
You are Locked On Warriors, your daily Golden State Warriors podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Warriors your first listen every day. Wrapping things up with Jackson Gatlin, the host of Locked On Rockets. You can follow him on all social media platforms at JT Gatlin. Look, so the Warriors are pursuing another former Houston Rocket.
They're just collecting former Rockets like Pokemon, man. Again, we're turning into Rockets West Coast over here.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, Usman Garuba, technically a member of the Warriors right now. He signed a 2-way deal. The Warriors traded for Chris Paul, a former Houston Rocket. And then now they're in pursuit, possibly, with Dwight Howard. Dwight Howard reportedly had a 2-day interview process with the Warriors. And Jason Dumas, he's the sports director for a local news station here in the San Francisco Bay Area called Cron. And I don't know where Jason gets his sources from. I know he has connections in Philly, but now he's starting to get some fantastic sources here in the Bay Area. And this is from his Twitter account. He's reporting that Dwight Howard has wrapped up his 2-day interview process with the Warriors. A decision could come as soon as today. And here's the part that maybe is particularly intriguing, is that the veterans of the Warriors, and when you hear veterans, you're probably thinking Steph, you're thinking Clay, you're thinking Dre. They have signed off on the idea of bringing Dwight Howard into the fold. And Dwight is now heading to Los Angeles to work out with Draymond Green and Chris Paul. This is starting tomorrow. There's been some clips online of Dre and Chris Paul, two very strong, minded individuals who are now teammates. They've been working out together. I think that's a good sign if Dwight Howard's going to work out with them. It doesn't mean anything per se, but I don't think it hurts the chances of Dwight signing with the Warriors. I personally want this more than anything for the team. I think they're desperate for a true big body to defend the likes of Nikola Jokic, defend the likes of Anthony Davis, for those middle of game minutes, right? Like, so Draymond is not burned out by the end and is not plagued with foul trouble. What are your thoughts on Dwight Howard, man? He is going to turn, I believe, 38 this season, if my math is correct. 37 or 38. Sorry, I don't have that exact number right now. So he's not getting younger, but he still looks phenomenal. What are your thoughts, man? He played for the Rockets. I don't know if he was a favorite there, but give us your take, sir.
So, I mean, just outside looking in, I think it would be phenomenal for the Warriors to pick up Dwight for the reasons that you already laid out, right? We were talking about in segment 2, the fact that the Warriors are an incredibly undersized team right now, right? You just need, I feel like in today's NBA, you can get away with it, but you do need, I think, situationally, like one big body on your roster. If your starting big man isn't, a quote unquote big man, then you need one big to just use for those spot minutes, right? And again, you pointed it out. Nobody's going to be asking Dwight to close out games for the Warriors. Nobody's going to be asking him to play crunch time minutes. They just probably need a body to throw in there for 10 to 12 minutes a night, very situationally, right? He's probably, if they do ultimately sign him, he's probably not even going to be a staple part of the rotation. It'll be a situational, as needed, game by game basis. And if you've got an opposing big who's terrorizing, the Hobbit Warriors, as you pointed out, then you throw Dwight Howard out there for 10 to 15 minutes, right? And his job is very simple. Go out there, get some rebounds, be a big body, use those 6 fouls, be a force so that Draymond isn't just completely wiped out by the end of the game. Because even though Draymond can handle playing bigger than he is and can handle the likes of the Anthony Davises and the Jokic's in small stretches, asking him to do that over the entire course of a 48-minute game is a tall order. And to ask him to do that during a regular season with a grueling 82-game schedule, and then, ideally right at the end of that, a deep postseason run, all of this, you don't want him to be burned out, right? And you don't want him, when players are burned out, right, they're more susceptible to injury, all of that. Draymond's a guy who's not getting any younger either. So I think it's great just from the perspective of you want a little bit more depth to your roster. And offensively, again, Dwight is a guy that I think a few years back finally realized and kind of bought into, hey, like, I'm not the old Dwight Howard. I'm not the guy that I was in Orlando. And that was his issue, right? That was his issue in Houston. And I think Dwight's a guy that really let some of the outside noise get to his head, right? The Shaqs of the world telling you, oh, you're not a real big if you're not posting up and, getting to work down low. And that was his issue in Houston. If he had just blocked all that out in Houston and just decided to be a rim running lob threat rebound machine, he could have averaged 30 and 15 playing next to James Harden. And those two could have had a massive amount of success as a duo for years, right? I mean, they faced the Warriors for the first time in the Western Conference Finals with that duo. And Dwight was fantastic in that playoff run because he hunkered down and he just did his job. He wasn't begging for touches. He kind of bought into that role, but then there was, animosity between he and James Harden because they're both kind of very quiet, passive aggressive guys. And that whole locker room divided and it was a mess. But these last few years, pretty much ever since Dwight's tenure with the Lakers, winning the title in the bubble with them, playing alongside AD, right? Taking that role, playing the 5 next to AD so that AD could play his more desired position of a 4 on the floor for LA. I think that was kind of the turning point for Dwight, where he kind of realized, hey, if I just buy into this kind of more niche role and stay in my lane and do what these teams are asking me to do, I can still find success as an NBA player. So I think I would love the signing for the Warriors, and I think it'd be a great pickup for him.
I wholeheartedly agree with you, man. And besides hosting Locked On Rockets, you also host Locked On NBA, I believe, once a week. So what is your prediction for the Warriors this year, man? They're not, I don't think they're going to be, many people are going to call them favorites. But a lot of people are saying they're in contention based largely on their experience and the veterans they have. I'm a little worried about this team if they don't get a player like Dwight Howard to give them those important minutes in the middle of the game against other teams' bigs. What is your take? Let's wrap the show up with that. What is your take for this upcoming season for the Warriors?
I think it's just, you look up and down the Western Conference as a whole, right? Just a 10,000 foot view. The West is going to be a bloodbath, man. And I think that Agreed. We're kind of back to where the scales of power, if you will, are going back to the Western Conference is reemerging a little bit, because you've got 13 teams in the West, 13, Cyrus, that want a shot at the playoffs, because the only two teams you can look at in the West that have zero goals of making the postseason or even sniffing a play-in tournament are the Spurs and more than likely the Blazers, right? They're dealing with the old Damian Lillard saga. Let's be honest, they're not going to be sniffing the play-in or the playoffs for a while. So outside of that, though, the Utah Jazz haven't torn it down yet. I've been a little surprised with how Danny Ainge has kind of decided to navigate that rebuild over there, but they're still a competent team, and they won 37 games this past season, didn't make the play-in. You've got the Houston Rockets that just committed a ton of money to Fred VanVleet, Dylan Brooks, and they want to make that step forward. Ime Udoka has talked about the fact that he hasn't missed the playoffs in his entire career, and he wants to continue that trend. So 13 out of the 15 teams in the West want to make the playoffs. This is kind of like a non-Warriors prediction. It's just like a Western Conference prediction. I don't think we see a single team in the West crack 50 wins. I think it's going to be so. You just look at this last season, Cyrus. The Nuggets were the number one seed, and they only had 53 wins. Only two teams cracked 50, and even more teams are going to be competitive this year in the West. So, from a parity perspective, I love it as an NBA fan. I love it when everybody is, guns blazing in the NBA. Everybody wants a piece of the playoff pie. For the Warriors, I can't write them off. I can't look at them and not say that they don't still have a strong shot at making a deep postseason run and making it to the title. I think the biggest question mark for them is ultimately going to be they're an older team. What do they look like health-wise when they make it to the playoffs, right? Can Chris Paul stay healthy for a season? Are any of the big three going to, deal with any major missed time throughout the year? If they can make it to the postseason, and you and I have talked about this previously for the Warriors on various outlets, but the Warriors seem like the kind of team where they've been there, they've done it, they've won their titles. They seem like the team that's just, all right, just let us make it to the playoffs. We don't care if we're an underdog. We don't care if we're a 6 or a 7 or an 8 seed. Just let us get there, and we have as good a shot as anybody else to make a run for the title.
Yeah, that's fair. I think a huge part of it this year, besides hopefully adding one more big player, is also the development of Jonathan Kuminga and Moses Moody, and whether or not Kerr's ready to trust them in bigger minutes. Because if Kuminga fulfills his potential, things could get scary for the rest of the league with this Golden State Warriors team. I want to give your team love, though. I thought the Rockets had a fantastic offseason, man. I'm stoked for you guys that you did not get James Harden. I didn't see what the benefit was of that. But most importantly, I think Ime Udoka as your head coach he's a great coach, man. And he brings out the best in players. Like, players, I feel like, are afraid of him. And that's a good thing. That means they're going to respect him and listen to him. So rule by fear is his mantra. And I'm all for it. So good luck with your team. I hope we collaborate again soon. Anything I missed? Anything you want to promote?
Nothing really to promote here. I mean, if there's any Warriors fans that want to come check out my Rockets musings over at LOR, then by all means swing by. It was fun being behind enemy lines, so to speak, over here. I hope that Warriors fans, will give me a warm welcome. I had, plenty of glowing things to say about the team, despite all of the years of pain and frustration that this organization has caused me personally. I've got some, I got to remember this because I hate the term. So, post-traumatic Steph disorder. There we go. That's what I struggle from post-traumatic Steph disorder from all the years that the Warriors have blocked the Rockets from, championship contention. But that's kind of in the past. The Warriors at the tail end of their, championship era with the big three, and the Rockets are on the come up as hopefully one of the young, exciting teams in the NBA. And knowing the Rockets' luck, somehow the Warriors will turn it around and be another young, exciting team within like 2 years. And then the Rockets are going to have to deal with the Warriors yet again, but it's all in good fun.
And again, if you look down on my screen, if you're watching this on YouTube where it says watch next, it says Locked On NBA. You can also watch Jackson Gatlin each week there. Do you have a set days? What days are you on hosting there?
We do the Monday show every week. And so it's always the three most relevant stories from around the NBA landscape. So going into the season, we've just been revisiting and looking at some of the odds for season awards this year and how certain players stack up. So MVP, Rookie of the Year, Most Improved Player, those kinds of things. And most recently, obviously, both for Locked On Rockets and Locked On NBA, we've had to talk about the entire Kevin Porter Jr. situation, which is a very delicate subject. But if you're curious about how all that's playing out for the Houston Rockets with Kevin Porter Jr.'s allegations and arrest, then go check out the show. We've got tons of content and reporting on that matter.
Yeah, good luck on that. That's you're tipping a fine line reporting on that story. But it's nonetheless, you kill it. You're phenomenal at what you do. Jackson, thank you so much for coming on the program. and you've made me a lot more excited about Usman Garuba. Thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone. We'll be back at this soon. Take care. Bye-bye.